We are so excited to be speaking once again with Marta Havryshko, visiting assistant professor at Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University.
Marta Havryshko, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you again. We wanted to check in with you because there's been a lot happening in Ukraine. There is talk of a new peace proposal floated by the U.S. and Russia. And meanwhile, Ukraine internally is in chaos over a corruption scandal touching Zelensky and his inner circle. For people who are not familiar with what's been happening on that front, catch us up. What is going on with this corruption controversy in Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I must say that it's not only corruption scandal. It's not only crisis connected to corruption. It's the entire political crisis. Because nowadays people discussed how it's only this corruption energy scandal. It's a part of a bigger picture, and how different security service, for example, different state agency are involved in all these corruption scheme crafted by Zelensky's friends. So now I will tell you a couple of words about this corruption scandal. So more than a week ago, the main anti-corruption body of Ukraine, NABU, published so-called Mindich tapes. Those tapes are audio of talks in one of the apartment in Kyiv, in Kyiv center, which is located in government district, very close to the government buildings. And the people there just were decision makers. They talked about kickbacks in the main state-run agency, Energoatom, 15% for those firms who want to cooperate and work with Energoatom. And they talked about who will go as, diplomat to which country. So they called them intellectual club. But actually, it was the great corruption scheme. It was a criminal gang that was stealing the money of Ukrainian taxpayers and Western aid, obviously. And the damage for Ukraine budget so far is approximately $100 million. But it's only about energy sector. But the main funding and the main part of Ukraine budget, almost 50% goes to defense sector. And the bigger part of this scheme connected to defense sector. And nowadays, NABU they paused publishing those tapes, and they said, or it's connected to national security issues. But the main problem with all this corruption is involvement of close friends of Zelensky. For example, Timur Mindich. How he is connected to Zelensky? He's a friend of Zelensky, but also business partner. He's the co-owner of the studio Kvartal 95, which created this political satirical show for Zelensky, where Zelensky played the key role, servant of the people, and helped basically to create this image of Zelensky as the outsider of the system who will be dedicated to fight corruption. But in this show, this history teacher who became a president collected his friends, and they all were fighting corruption. In reality, when Zelensky came to power, he collected his friends to build corruption. And this is the main problem. And on those Mindich tapes, we have mastermind behind all this. And this mastermind is Yermak himself. Is the chief of staff, is the chief of office of the president. So Mindich is just top manager. He is not the main profiteer from this entire scheme. And what else is interesting? So for the first, Firstly, what is important that friends, very close friends of Zelensky, are involved in this corruption. This corruption wasn't possible without involvement of Zelensky and Yermak. And the second is so-called Russian influence. Why? Because this laundry apartment where they decided who will get what was located near the headquarters of Ukraine Security Service, very close, seven minutes walk to security service in Kyiv. But this apartment belonged to the former member of Ukraine Parliament, Andriy Derkach, who is sanctioned by US actually, who is now senator of Russian parliament and is accused in Ukraine for treason. And on Mindich tapes, all these wonderful guys, they discussed how much money in this apartment, how much money will go to Russia. So basically people who are members of Security Council close to Zelensky, advisors, they decide who will be sanctioned by Zelensky. They themselves have some connections with Russia. And nowadays, they are trying to silence everyone who is talking about this Mindich Gate and accuse them of collaboration with Russia, spreading Russian narratives, be on Russian payroll, while themselves have a business in Russia. Some of them have Russian passports, some of them have relatives in Russia, and some of them have still business in Russia. Mindich, until the end of 2024, paid taxes from his new diamond enterprise, his diamond corporation in Russia. He paid taxes, 500,000 only was paid in 2024 for Russian budget. And nobody had questions to Mindich. You know, everyone had questions to anti-corruption activists, to dissidents, to political opponents and rivals of Zelensky inside the country. So it's very interesting development. And it's a full-scale political crisis because even some members of political party that belongs to Zelensky turned on him and they demand that Yermak will be fired at least. And all those officials that are involved in this corruption scheme will be fired. But for Zelensky, it's not acceptable. He's protecting Yermak by every means. And this new peace plan that appeared yesterday in Western media helps him actually, because nowadays there is the idea that it's all CIA plot against Ukraine. It's all a Trump crafted, plan to remove Zelensky from power because he's such dedicated, he's such a big Ukraine patriot and hero. So it's very complicated situation, and I have no idea how Ukraine will survive this political crisis because many people lost their trust in Zelensky. Before this scandal, they said that the support of Zelensky was approximately 60%. And in the midst of this scandal, 3 close research showed that his support is less than 20%. So what to do with these people's trust? How you will force people to go to the front line and die when we have corruption in defense sector?
And when you say the closed research, you're referring to closed polls?
Yes. Those, close polls, 3 at least. They were voiced by Yaroslav Zhelezniak. He's a member of parliament, and he's one who was tracing the scandal very closely and made his own investigations with his team. And nowadays he's afraid that he will be somehow punished by Zelensky and his security service, because security service of Ukraine is under Zelensky, as well as military intelligence. And nowadays we know that the key NABU detective Mohammad Rasulullah, together with his father, were thrown in prison. And nowadays they are in jail and they are accused of collaboration with Russia.
Right. And NABU, this anti-corruption agency, this is the same agency that Zelensky tried to close down this summer, which led to the biggest protests that he's faced so far. So if we talk about that, and also the fact that this corruption scheme involves kickbacks with Ukraine's energy production at a time when a lot of Ukrainians are going without power because of all the Russian attacks. So talk about how that's being received. The fact that, Zelensky circles or people close to Zelensky profiting off of energy kickbacks at a time when Ukrainians are going without heat and power.
Yesterday I watched a video of brother of my close friend, and he now is veteran without two legs, with high amputation, and still without artificial legs, and he was trying to crawl to his apartment on the 5th floor in Lviv, in my native city. Because elevator was dead, no electricity yesterday in Lviv at all because of them due to Russian attacks.
You're talking about someone who had double amputation, does not have prosthetics yet.
Yeah.
The elevator was down and he was literally trying to crawl to his apartment.
Yeah, and he recorded a video of this on 5th floor. He crawled, and I was looking at him, and it's all amid this scandal in energy sector. And we, on these vintage tapes, we clearly hear that all those involved in this corruption, they discuss, should we build protection to our energy objects or no? And some of them say, it's not a good business model because it's all will be destroyed by Russian rockets. So they decided, not to build. So nowadays, many Ukrainians, when they are sitting without water, electricity and heat, for 12, 15 hours, per day in some cities, they are outraged and they are thinking, why this happening? How it possible that, ordinary Ukrainians are demanded, to go to the front line, to send their sons, to sit hours without heat, water and electricity. But at the same time, our, political elites are making money out of their sufferings because that Europe nowadays send a lot of money to protect Ukraine energy system because Russia intensified its attack. For Russia, it's a cool strategy to force Ukraine to surrender. And Ukraine is sending money while they are trying just to steal those money. And yes,
you're saying there's protection that they could have implemented and paid for, but they didn't see the Ukraine Zelensky. He didn't see it as a good business opportunity. But there are things that could have been done to protect the energy and the people.
Exactly. That's why many people are shocked. Many people are shocked. We are told that this is existential war, that we should, be patient. We should, donate every single, cent to the armed forces. I remember my mother was on terminal stage of the cancer, and he was making pierogi, vareniki. She was making jam to send to the soldiers, to the front line, to our, boys. She dedicated her life, her entire days of her life to help army. And her pension was only $50 per month. And she, even in this precarious situation, she was ready to help army. Yeah, because she, as many people in Ukraine, they are ready to send their entire pensions, everything that they have to support Ukraine army. And in the same very moment, people in power, empowered by Zelensky, actually, were profiting from this war. And nowadays, there is a big question, who was actually involved? Because nobody believed that security service of Ukraine didn't know actually about this office where all those, money were laundered. it's just impossible that they didn't know. So many people assume they provide a cover for them. And security service arrested this detective of Nabu and his father and threw them in jail. So now this is a question, how many more people involved in this corruption scheme and how many people profited from this?
Can you elaborate a little bit on what they could have been paying for that would have protected the Ukrainian people and they decided was not a good investment?
So we are talking about different objects that belong to Ukraine energy infrastructure. It's a main target for Russia nowadays. And we were told everything is okay. We are building a good protection because we have money and Europe help us. Everything will be okay. We will survive this winter. But so far they failed to build this protection, and so many objects nowadays are destroyed, and people are just suffering without heat and without electricity in the winter time. And it's not even winter, it's not even freezing outside. So what will happen in the following months? How many people will lose their life due to the lack of heat? How many residential buildings will be destroyed because of collapse of the entire system, because this water will just not circulate, It's just crazy. And we are told to prepare, to prepare ourselves, how we can prepare ourselves. It was your duty. It was your responsibility. And Ukrainians relied on you, and European partners relied on you.
You being the United States or you being Zelensky?
You mean Ukrainian people where
that's what they used to, okay.
Yeah. Because, all of my friends, all of my relatives, close relatives, my sisters with, their kids, small kids are still in Ukraine, and I'm still in touch with them every single day. And I ask, I check on them, And yesterday they told me, we are freezing, and my sister is on the 9th floor with 3-year-old kid. So can you imagine the level of, everyday life, the quality of everyday life, that was created not only by Russian attacks and Russian aggression, but also by our national leaders and our national savers, that instead of building this energy protection, West just stole money from the West, because Ukraine is completely dependent on this, money. And it's very interesting, actually, the reaction of Europe. It's very interesting. Because many people say, many members of political elites, these war hawks say, oh, this scandal is about how Zelensky is fighting corruption. The entire scandal is a good sign of fighting corruption in Ukraine. So we should still support Ukraine and send more money to Ukraine. And this is very cynical, actually, because I read this as, we don't have an exit strategy from this war. We want this war to continue, but we will not send our sons. And in order to continue this war, we need Zelensky in place, we need Yermak in place, we need the entire system built by him in place to continue bleeding Russia, weakening Russia by Ukrainian lives. So it's very cynical for me. Nobody cares about ordinary Ukrainians. Nobody cares that hundreds of thousands of people don't want to fight. And the statistic of deserters and those who went a wall is just very, very telling in this regard. Today I told my students, we talked about immigration, about refugee crisis in Europe nowadays. And I told them that in February 2022, when Russia attacked Ukraine, only 5% of those, approximately 5% of those who left Ukraine were men. Nowadays in Europe, Almost 25% of those who are among refugees, Ukraine refugees, are Ukrainian men, and many of them of the draft age, of conscription age. Why is that? Because they are trying to survive this proxy war between West and Russia. They're trying to save their life and not to, not to be victims of this meat grinder and great geopolitical game. And this is very telling. When we hear all those fairy tales, or Ukrainians rather die than, sacrifice their country to Russia, and will rather die than surrender. Look at numbers of deserters. Look at numbers who are trying to avoid military draft by any means. Look at numbers of those young men who fled the country. Look at them.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the peace plan, the so-called peace plan that was reported on by Axios on Tuesday night.
Yes.
It claims that Trump is secretly negotiating a 28-point peace plan with Russia, yes. And apparently without Ukraine's involvement. And according to the New York Times, the deal would, quote, require Kyiv to surrender territory, significantly reduce the size of its army, and relinquish some types of weaponry. And another thing is that the Times said that the settlement proposal is similar to one that Russia presented in talks in 2022. What do you know about this peace deal? And is that true that they're similar to what they were offering 3 years ago?
It's a very tricky question. Only today, this plan, according to Zelensky, was officially handed to Ukraine side, to the president of Zelensky. So only today they received this plan. And it seems, yes, that Ukraine side and European collective, Western Europe, collective West, EU, wasn't involved in developing this plan. So it seems that, yes, it was crafted by two sides, two main actors, US and Russia. What is different in this peace plan? In 2022, when Ukraine and Russia were negotiating in Istanbul, there were no Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblasts involved. Nowadays, every single plan is worse than the previous one. Every single plan. And nowadays, so Russia demands not only entire Donbass, including the regions that are not captured by them yet, and it seems that they are ready to pay for them. It will be some sort of rent or something like that. So they require entire Donbass, meaning Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, and of course Crimea, but also they require Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblast. But taking into consideration that Russian forces nowadays are present also in Dnipro region, I believe, and many skeptics believe, that the next plan could include also those territories. So every single next plan will be even worse. Yes, this plan is terrible. Why for Ukraine? Because no security guarantees from Europe and US, basically. Why? Because nobody wants to send their sons to the front line into Ukraine trenches. Nobody wants to sacrifice their loved ones to beat Russia. What Europe is willing to do, to sacrifice only Ukrainian lives. That's why Ukraine will not be given security guarantees. Ukraine will not be accepted to NATO. So for Russia, it's a very important question. No Ukraine in NATO, no NATO in Ukraine. So basically, this plan is all about this and Ukraine army. So the point of Zelensky is, if we do not receive security guarantees from Europe and US, we should have a strong and big army. So, but Russia said no big army and no long-range missiles and drones, because they're afraid that they will hit Russian territory. That's why, yes, the conditions are catastrophic. That's why in Ukraine society, from yesterday, when this plan was leaked to Western media, the main association is capitulation. Everyone is talking about capitulation. And it's very dangerous rhetoric. Why? Because in 2019, actually, it was already a big movement. No to capitulation organized by far right, by Poroshenko. They threatened Zelensky to hang him on the Maidan Square, on the main square of the country's sacred for this revolution of dignity and for the protest. So I believe that those who benefit from the war, I mean some oligarchs, I mean some businessmen, I mean far right, included the entire Azov movement, private sector and other, they will refuse to surrender, and they will, because as we see, Bieletsky said nothing about the corruption scandal.
Bieletsky is the one of the founders of the Azov Battalion.
Yes, and
right.
He's the leader of entire Azov movement.
Yes.
When we look at their gatherings, especially youth gatherings, they praise Bieletsky as it's Hitler-Jugend style. They praise him as a leader of nation, as a father of nation, with the same rhetoric. And Bieletsky, with all his credibility, he kept silence on this corruption scandal. Why? Because he is on payroll of Zelensky and his office. And this is what I'm telling all the time. Zelensky nowadays is working together with far-right and all neo-Nazis groups in Ukraine. And they all avoid criticism of this corruption scandal. Why? Because they are profiting from this war and they want to keep fighting, because war for them is a golden age, golden era. They became rich. Yeah. And despite of all scandals involved, Bieletsky Brigade, they kidnapped men in Ternopil region. They tortured them. Then they demand bribe from their family members. They organize gang-style, criminal-style punishment of their rivals. They participated in seizing churches, buildings that belong to Ukraine Orthodox Church, yes. And nobody cares. They are portrayed as, by Ukraine media, by many politicians, and even by some liberal historians like Yaroslav Radzak. Bieletsky is portrayed as a national leader who is potentially capable to unite the country and to become a new president. It's crazy. It's crazy. Neo-Nazi, who is known for his, praising Ratko Mladic, war criminal, for his anti-Semitic rhetoric, for organizing racial attacks and hate crimes in many cities, nowadays is portrayed as national leader in Ukraine and potential president. It's crazy. Crazy times.
It's all just so sad because there's so many ways that all this could have been avoided with what I think were reasonable compromises going back many years. The Minsk Accords, the Istanbul talks that Boris Johnson and Joe Biden sabotaged, according to so many sources.
Yeah.
There have been so many opportunities. And now, just to circle back to the corruption thing, the fact that Zelensky won't fire Yermak, and the fact that so many people, including in parliament, including in Zelensky's own party, are blaming his right-hand man, Andrei Yermak. I mean, what do you think this means? Where is this headed? And why is Zelensky so attached to Yermak, who's known in some circles as being the actual real president of Ukraine, given how influential and powerful he is?
Yermak is the major decision maker in Ukraine. And many discussions are in Ukraine about the role of Yermak. So he's basically, he's running the country. And Zelensky is just, many people say that Zelensky is just, just exercise his will. And because of this high dependency on Yermak, Zelensky is ready to sacrifice his image to protect Yermak from removing from power nowadays. As you know, Yermak, and according to Washington Post as well, in recent days, Yermak was trying to go to London and have a meeting with Zaluzhny, because it is believed that Zaluzhny could be the next president of Ukraine. He has the biggest rating approval nowadays in Ukraine. But Zaluzhny refused, according to many sources, Zaluzhny refused to meet with him because he's very toxic. And Mindich tapes clearly prove that basically behind all these corruption schemes in both energy sector or defense sector, there is Yermak. So he's the main figure. So Zaluzhny is trying to distance himself from this toxic person, but not Zelensky. Even the chief of in parliament of the group of servant of the people deputies, Arachamia, he is against Yermak. And he asked Zelensky personally to fire Yermak. Today in the evening will be, I hope it will be meeting between Zelensky and his servant of the People Party. Yeah. And they demand to save country by firing Yermak. And their main argument is not about it's not about public perception inside the country. It's about how Ukraine looks at international arena. So the main question for them that we can lose all Western aid and all Western money if we will keep him in power. But several sources already said, and Deputat member of Parliament Zhelezniak recently published information that Zelensky will protect Yermak and will not fire him because, his entire power was constructed by this entire structure was constructed by Yermak. He depends on Yermak so much. That's why he's ready to protect him. And as we see, Western partners or masters of Ukraine, in Western Europe, it seems they are okay with this. And they want to prevent NABU, to my understanding, from publishing new evidence about involvement of Yermak in corruption in defense sector. So everyone is playing their part and everyone is pretending that everything is okay, Ukraine is fighting corruption, and we should continue our war efforts. So I believe, and it's a very dangerous sign, the entire reaction of Western Europe is very dangerous because it means that they will try to keep this bloody war and to send Ukraine guys, mostly boys, to the meat grinder for the next at least following months. And recently it was the phone call from Merz to Zelensky, and he advised him to stop the flow of young Ukraine men to Europe because he said Ukraine needs them. We don't need them. Ukraine needs them. Of course, we are paying, we are sending a weapon. Someone should operate this weapon. Yeah.
Let's just highlight this. This is so cynical. So, this is German Chancellor Merz, who claims to want to defend Ukrainians. He wants to support Ukrainians. Here he is complaining that too many young Ukrainian men are coming to his country, to Germany, and he wants them to go back to fight and die. I know you talked about this a little bit, but just, the images that we've seen on social media of people, just tragic families trying to hold on to their loved ones as they're being seized off the streets to go fight on the front lines. Talk about the class element here, how the elite of Ukraine are not being impacted by these, forced conscriptions. It's working class people who are being forced mostly to go fight and die in this long running war.
Exactly. In terms of conscription and military draft and military service during the war, we have the division in Ukrainian society over class line. Recently, the mayor of Kyiv, Klitschko, said that the conscription age must be reduced to 22 or 23. Both of his sons are already this age, and both of them are abroad. One of them in Great Britain, another in US. And many, many sons of Ukrainian elite are also abroad. some sons of mayor, for example, of city Lviv, Sadovay, some sons of members of parliament, they are abroad. All sons of Umerov, the former defense minister, they also are abroad. And what we clearly see, our political elite, they don't send their sons to the front line and to the trenches. They send working class people. They kidnap them from the streets. And Ukraine is an open secret. How much you should pay to avoid conscription. And some people are ready to pay $20,000, $30,000 to escape conscription or to escape Ukraine in general. That's why this war turned into war of poor, when mostly poor guys are dying. We don't have any more combat volunteers that were standing lines to draft officers in 2022 in February that wanted to fight and defend their motherland. We don't have them anymore. All those who are sent to the front line nowadays, 99%, are forced to go and fight. And what we see, the numbers of deserters are increasing. According to some estimations, there is approximately 500,000 people who deserted already from the army. And guess what? 80% of them leave training centers. So it's not about war fatigue. It's about distrust to the government. It's about unwillingness to die for these elites and for unwinnable war. Less and less people believe that this war could be won by Ukraine. Only few of them. That's why people are trying to save their lives. But this is not, what is discussed heavily in Western media or by political elites. They keep spreading this fairy tale that all Ukrainians are ready to fight and ready to die. It's not true. Who are ready to fight are Ukraine political elites whose sons are abroad, safe and well. Sons are given good education and at prestigious universities, and those who are dying are working class people, people with disabilities, people with diseases, tuberculosis, cancer. They all are sent to the front line today. So it's crazy. That's why some people believe that, it's a real extermination of working class people in Ukraine.
So you were someone who at first, correct, you supported Zelensky?
Yes, I supported Zelensky. I voted for him. Why? Because I was against this, Poroshenko agenda that was very nationalistic. And Zelensky agenda was very, liberal and was very about, peace and about fighting corruption.
Right. That's how he ran, right?
Protection, diversity and inclusion and protection of Russian-speaking people, And nowadays he's, chief of this ethno-nationalist agenda because he's profiting from instrumentalizing this agenda.
So if you had been Zelensky, right, if you had been in his position or you were advising him, let's say, what would you have done in response to Russia?
The first demand from many people like me who voted for Zelensky, and there are many of us, plenty of us, because we remember that in 2019, Zelensky won with, approval of 73%. So the main demand just to fulfill his program, his promises.
That he campaigned on.
Yeah, one of his promise was actually the question of corruption was central to his presidential campaign, and he used the Svenarchuk guy who was connected to Poroshenko, and he was a symbol of corruption in defense sector during Poroshenko. And he said, if only one Svenarchuk will be in my circle, I will leave the office. Yeah, and nowadays we have plenty of Svenarchuks in his inner circle, and they are good and well, and they are profiting from war. It's the first question. The second one, The demand of Russia was, back in 2019, to reintegrate Donbass with a specific status, with a very special status. But instead of, fulfilling his promises and giving special status to Donbass, he was listening to far right who were publicly threatening him and to his Western advisors who pushed this hawkish agenda and wanted this bloody war. That's why he betrayed all of us, his voters, his supporters, and that's why he must go.
Funnily enough, Marta, someone who recently admitted exactly what you just said, that ultra-nationalists stood in the way of a compromise, stood in the way of the Minsk Accords, was Boris Johnson, Zelensky's biggest cheerleader and a guy who was arguably responsible, or partially responsible for the ongoing carnage today. Boris Johnson said in an interview that it was Ukrainians, ultra-nationalists, who rejected the compromise.
Volodymyr Zelensky is not he's not an unreasonable guy. He got elected really as a peacenik. He was out that, 2019, he tried to do a deal with Putin. As far as I can remember, his basic problem was that the, Ukrainian nationalists couldn't accept the compromise, and you can see why not.
It's an open secret because so many far right, Bieletsky recorded this, 20 minutes video with threatening Zelensky. I will gather thousands of my, supporters of military men and we will show you our power. The leader of Pravy sector, Yarosh, promised to hang him on Maidan. Yes, so it wasn't possible for him in these circumstances. And Poroshenko joined basically this very radical agenda because Poroshenko, for him, it was, just political game. But nowadays we see that it was a major mistake because, today, another bodies were handed to Ukraine, 1,000 bodies, and Ukraine in return handed only 30 bodies of fallen soldiers to Russia. So far, only in 2025, Russia gave returned to Ukraine more than 14,000 bodies of Ukraine fallen soldiers. Why Ukraine returned approximately 200 bodies? And we understand why this is happening because Russia is seizing new territory and collect those fallen soldiers that couldn't be collected by Ukraine side because Ukraine side is retrieving. So it means that every single, day Ukraine is losing territories, is losing people, and more people are subjected to sufferings, to fear for their future. I can't understand how Ukraine can survive, if war will continue.
It's so depressing. Yeah. It's so tragic. Marta, we're very grateful for you taking the time to share with us your insights on this unfolding crisis. Any last thoughts for us as we wrap?
I'm very grateful that you cover these inconvenient topics. And I believe that, the issue of Ukraine is not only about, Eastern Europe. It's not only about Ukraine and Russia. It's more. And I believe that U.S. must play a huge role in peace process, and we should stop funding war. We should concentrate on peace, not on producing more war, more cemeteries, more widows, and more orphans. Let's concentrate on peace.
Amen. Marta Havryshko, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.